Ladies and gentlemen, discipline is not something you are born with, it is something you train. Just as a muscle strengthens through use, so does discipline. The more you practice restraint, consistency, and effort, the easier it becomes. The key is repetition. Do it every day, no matter how small the action. Discipline begins with clarity. Without a firm foundation of principles, discipline lacks direction, and without direction, discipline becomes a mere exercise in self-denial rather than a meaningful pursuit. To build true discipline, one must first define the core values that will serve as guiding pillars. This is not a passive process. It requires deep introspection and a willingness to ask hard questions. What do I stand for? What do I believe in? What kind of person do I want to become? These are not questions with easy answers, but they are essential to building a disciplined life. A person who lacks clear principles may try to impose discipline upon themselves through sheer force of will, but this approach is unsustainable. Willpower alone is fleeting. It fluctuates with mood, circumstance, and fatigue. However, when discipline is rooted in strong, well-defined values, it transforms from an external struggle into an internal commitment. A person who values honesty, for instance, does not need to muster willpower to tell the truth. They do so naturally because honesty is a core part of who they are. Similarly, someone who values physical health does not constantly battle themselves over whether to exercise or eat well. These actions flow from their deep-seated belief in the importance of health. Defining principles also eliminates confusion and indecision. Many people struggle with discipline not because they lack strength, but because they are uncertain about what truly matters to them. Without clarity, every decision becomes a moment of hesitation. Every challenge an internal debate. Should I wake up early or sleep in? Should I finish my work or procrastinate? Should I push through discomfort or take the easier path? These questions disappear when principles are firmly established. A person who has decided that diligence is a core value does not wrestle with whether to put in the effort, they simply do it. Moreover, strong principles provide resilience in moments of weakness. No one is immune to moments of doubt, fatigue, or frustration. There will be days when motivation wanes and when external circumstances make discipline difficult. In these moments, principles act as an anchor. When one feels tempted to stray from the path, they can return to their foundational beliefs and remind themselves why they chose discipline in the first place. A person who values integrity does not suddenly compromise their morals when faced with a difficult choice. A person who values perseverance does not give up at the first sign of struggle. To develop these principles, one must take the time to reflect on what truly matters. This can be done through journaling, deep contemplation, or studying the wisdom of those who have lived disciplined lives. Once these principles are identified, they must be reinforced through daily action. Discipline is not something one simply decides upon. It must be practiced, refined, and strengthened over time. By building a life around clear, unwavering values, discipline ceases to be a burden and instead becomes a natural expression of one's identity. The way we perceive challenges determines how we respond to them. Many people view difficulties as obstacles, as inconveniences that stand in the way of their goals. However, a disciplined mind does not see challenges as setbacks, but as opportunities for growth. This shift in perspective is crucial because it transforms struggle from something to be avoided into something to be embraced. Challenges are not there to break us, they exist to refine us. Every difficulty carries within it the potential to strengthen our character, sharpen our skills, and teach us valuable lessons, if we are willing to see them that way. A key aspect of training the mind to see challenges as opportunities is recognizing that growth only happens through resistance. Just as muscles grow by being placed under stress, the mind becomes stronger by facing adversity. When we encounter a difficult situation, we have two choices. We can see it as an unfair burden and complain, or we can ask ourselves, how can this make me better? The latter mindset is what separates those who develop true discipline from those who remain stuck in cycles of frustration and self-doubt. This shift in perspective does not happen overnight. It requires deliberate effort and practice. One way to cultivate this mindset is through reframing, a mental exercise in which we consciously reinterpret a challenge in a positive light. For example, instead of seeing a demanding job as overwhelming, we can view it as an opportunity to develop patience, resilience, and efficiency. Instead of seeing failure as something shameful, we can recognize it as a valuable teacher that highlights areas for improvement. Every situation, no matter how difficult, contains something we can learn from if we are willing to look for it. Another way to train the mind is to study those who have turned adversity into success. History is full of individuals who faced immense challenges, yet used them as stepping stones. Athletes who overcame injuries, entrepreneurs who built businesses after multiple failures, leaders who endured hardship yet emerged stronger. These stories serve as reminders that struggles are not the end, but rather the path to something greater. When we internalize this lesson, we stop fearing challenges and begin to welcome them. Embracing difficulties also means rejecting the illusion of comfort as the ideal state. Many people seek to avoid discomfort at all costs, believing that an easy life is a happy life. However, a life without challenge is stagnant. Comfort may feel good in the short term, but it does not foster growth. By willingly stepping into difficulty, by choosing the harder path when given the option, we train our minds to become stronger and more adaptable. The disciplined mind does not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, "How can I use this?" This simple shift in thinking changes everything. It transforms obstacles into stepping stones, setbacks into lessons, and difficulties into opportunities. Over time, as this perspective becomes second nature, challenges lose their power to intimidate us. Instead, they become the very things that push us to become better, stronger, and more disciplined individuals. One of the greatest sources of frustration and anxiety in life comes from trying to control things that are beyond our power. People waste enormous amounts of energy worrying about the opinions of others, the outcome of uncontrollable events, or the way the world unfolds around them. However, real discipline comes from understanding a fundamental truth. Control is limited. There are things we can influence and there are things we cannot. Learning to focus only on what is within our control while letting go of everything else is one of the most powerful mental shifts a person can make. At the core of this mindset is the realization that the only true control we have is over our own actions, thoughts, and responses. No matter what happens externally, we always have a choice in how we react. This is where true discipline lies, not in trying to manipulate the world to fit our desires, but in mastering our own mindset and behaviors. When we focus on what we can control, our effort, our attitude, our perspective, we take ownership of our lives. We stop blaming external circumstances and start taking responsibility for how we respond to them. Letting go of what we cannot control is not an act of weakness or surrender. It is an act of wisdom. People often believe that worrying, stressing, or obsessing over things outside their influence somehow helps them regain control. In reality, this only drains energy and creates unnecessary suffering. Accepting that some things are beyond our power allows us to redirect our focus to where it truly matters. If it rains on the day of an important event, there is no use in complaining. What can be controlled is how we adapt. If someone criticizes us unfairly, we cannot control their words, but we can control how we interpret and respond to them. This shift in perspective is liberating. This mindset also strengthens resilience. Life is unpredictable and setbacks are inevitable. Those who obsess over what they cannot change often feel defeated when things do not go their way. However, those who focus on what is within their control remain grounded, adjusting to circumstances instead of being crushed by them. If a goal is blocked by an unforeseen challenge, a disciplined person does not waste time lamenting the unfairness of the situation. Instead, they ask, "What can I do next?" They move forward, adapting and adjusting rather than dwelling on what they cannot change. The practice of focusing only on what can be controlled requires conscious effort. It involves self-awareness, patience, and a willingness to accept uncertainty. It is not about being indifferent or passive. Rather, it is about choosing where to direct one's energy. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, we free ourselves from unnecessary stress and find peace in knowing that we are doing our best with what is within our power. This is the essence of discipline, not controlling the world, but mastering ourselves. Discipline is not built in moments of grand achievement, but in the small, everyday actions that often seem insignificant. Many people focus on big goals, success, excellence, or mastery, without realizing that these outcomes are the result of consistently executing the small things with precision. The foundation of any great accomplishment lies in the habits, routines, and minor decisions that shape a person's character over time. If one cannot master the little things, they will never be able to handle the big things when the moment arrives. Small actions, repeated consistently, create momentum. A person who wakes up early every morning to work on their craft, even if it is only for a short period, builds discipline that compounds over time. Someone who maintains order in their personal space cultivates a mindset of structure and clarity. The way a person does anything is often the way they do everything. If they neglect the small details, arriving on time, keeping their word, following through on promises, they are likely to struggle when faced with bigger challenges that require the same discipline on a larger scale. Excellence is never an accident. It is a habit formed through attention to the smallest aspects of life. People often underestimate the power of seemingly minor habits. Skipping a single workout, leaving a task unfinished, or ignoring a small responsibility might not seem significant at the moment. However, every time a person chooses to ignore a small discipline, they reinforce the habit of inconsistency. On the other hand, when someone commits to doing the little things right, making their bed, sticking to a schedule, showing up prepared, they train themselves to approach life with discipline and focus. These small victories build confidence and create a mindset of achievement. The mastery of small things also builds trust, both with oneself and with others. When a person follows through on small commitments, they develop a sense of reliability. This extends to bigger areas of life, where others begin to recognize them as dependable. Leaders, athletes, and high achievers in any field understand this principle. They know that discipline is not something they can switch on only when needed. It is a way of life, developed through the daily practice of small disciplines. Those who are careless with small details often find themselves struggling when faced with greater responsibility. Another reason mastering small things is essential is that they prepare the mind to handle bigger challenges with composure. If a person cannot manage their own schedule, how can they manage a team? If they struggle to meet personal deadlines, how will they handle high-stakes projects? Every minor action is training for something bigger. By treating small tasks with the same level of seriousness as major ones, a person builds the resilience, patience, and focus necessary for larger successes. Ultimately, discipline is not about waiting for the big moments to test one's strength, but about refining it daily in the smallest ways. When these small disciplines become second nature, success in greater challenges follows naturally. Discipline requires consistency, and consistency requires stability. However, emotions are unpredictable, often pulling us in different directions and clouding our judgment. While emotions themselves are not inherently bad, they can easily become the enemy of discipline if they are allowed to dictate actions. A disciplined person does not ignore emotions, but learns to detach from them, ensuring that their decisions are driven by reason rather than impulse. This ability to separate action from emotion is what allows people to stay committed to their goals, even when motivation is low or circumstances become difficult. One of the main ways emotions disrupt discipline is by creating resistance. Fear, doubt, frustration, and boredom are all emotional states that can push people away from doing what needs to be done. A person may set out with the intention of waking up early to exercise, but when the alarm rings, the emotion of comfort urges them to stay in bed. They may commit to a strict work schedule, but when faced with a tedious task, the emotion of boredom tempts them to procrastinate. In these moments, emotions act as barriers, encouraging inaction or deviation from what is necessary. The disciplined individual, however, does not make decisions based on how they feel in the moment. They recognize that feelings are temporary and that their goals require consistency regardless of their emotional state. Detachment from emotions does not mean suppressing them. Suppression leads to internal conflict, where emotions are ignored but still influence behavior in indirect ways. Instead, detachment means observing emotions objectively, acknowledging their presence without allowing them to dictate actions. When frustration arises, a disciplined person does not react impulsively or abandon their efforts. Instead, they take a step back, recognize the feeling for what it is, and proceed with what they know needs to be done. This practice of emotional detachment creates a sense of control, ensuring that one's actions are driven by purpose rather than momentary moods. Another way emotions disrupt discipline is by distorting reality. When a person is overwhelmed by anxiety, they may convince themselves that they are incapable of achieving their goals. When anger takes over, they may act irrationally and make decisions they later regret. By learning to detach, individuals gain clarity. They see things as they truly are, rather than through the lens of emotional distortion. This ability to maintain a clear, rational perspective is crucial for long-term success. Training the mind to detach from emotions requires practice. One effective method is mindfulness, which involves becoming aware of emotions without being controlled by them. When an emotion arises, instead of reacting immediately, one can pause, observe it, and remind themselves that it is just a passing state. Over time, this practice strengthens the ability to remain composed and act with discipline, no matter what emotions are present. By mastering emotional detachment, individuals gain control over their actions and decisions. They no longer fall victim to fleeting feelings that lead to inconsistency. Instead, they cultivate the ability to stay focused, committed, and unwavering in their pursuit of discipline. Discipline, like any skill, is not something one is born with. It is something that must be developed through practice. Just as physical strength is built through repeated exercise, mental discipline is built through consistent effort. The more a person exercises discipline, the stronger it becomes. However, just as a muscle weakens without use, discipline also fades when it is not consistently practiced. The key to building unshakable self-control lies in repetition, doing the right things even when they feel difficult, over and over again until they become second nature. Repetition creates habits, and habits shape behavior. When an action is repeated frequently enough, it becomes automatic. A person who repeatedly wakes up early, regardless of how they feel, eventually stops relying on motivation to do so. It simply becomes part of their routine. Someone who practices self-control when faced with distractions develops an instinct to stay focused, even in challenging situations. Discipline does not happen in an instant. It is forged through the repeated choice to act in alignment with one's values and goals. Consistency in small acts of discipline leads to greater resilience in larger challenges. Many people assume that discipline is only necessary for major life achievements, but it is actually strengthened in the small, daily decisions. A person who consistently chooses to complete their tasks, maintain order in their environment, or control their impulses, is training their mind to handle bigger obstacles with the same level of commitment. Just as an athlete does not start by lifting the heaviest weights, but gradually builds strength through consistent training, a disciplined person does not suddenly develop immense self-control overnight. It is the result of repeated effort over time. Repetition also rewires the brain. The more a behavior is practiced, the more the brain adapts to make it easier. This is known as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself based on repeated experiences. When discipline is practiced regularly, it becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural response. The first time a person resists the urge to procrastinate, it may feel incredibly difficult. But if they continue to make the same choice, day after day, their brain begins to associate work with focus and productivity, making it easier to take action in the future. This is why those who have mastered discipline appear to have effortless control. It is not because they are naturally stronger-willed, but because they have trained themselves through repetition. However, just as muscles can weaken without regular training, discipline can deteriorate if neglected. Skipping small commitments, giving in to short-term pleasures, or allowing excuses to take over weakens the ability to stay consistent. The good news is that, just like rebuilding physical strength, discipline can always be regained through consistent practice. By focusing on daily habits, reinforcing small acts of self-control, and understanding that repetition is the key to mastery, anyone can develop a level of discipline that carries them through life's greatest challenges. Discipline is not something that appears overnight, nor is it something reserved for the naturally strong-willed. It is a muscle that grows with repetition, a mindset that strengthens with practice, and a commitment that deepens with every small act of self-control. The path to self-mastery is built on the foundation of consistent effort, choosing discipline over comfort, action over excuses, and perseverance over fleeting emotions. True discipline is not about being perfect. It is about showing up, day after day, regardless of how we feel. It is about controlling what we can, letting go of what we cannot, and training our minds to see challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. It is in mastering the small things that we prepare ourselves for the big things. It is in detaching from emotions that we find clarity and consistency. And ultimately, it is through repetition that we transform discipline from a struggle into a way of life. The question is not whether you have discipline, it is whether you are willing to build it. Every action, every choice, and every habit shapes the person you become. So start now, take control, strengthen the muscle. Because when discipline becomes who you are, success is no longer a matter of chance. It is inevitable.